Hi, welcome back at my second session at MVPDays online. My name is Daalmans, and in this session I will talk all about managing your iOS devices with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. In my daily job, in my daily life, I'm a trainer, a Microsoft certified trainer, an architect, an author, and in my free time I'm also leading the Workplace Ninja user group in the Netherlands. If you want to reach out, here are my contact details, and feel free to reach out if you have a question or an idea for an upcoming blog or an upcoming session. In my earlier session, I discussed why we should use modern management instead of mobile device management. This session will be all about, or almost all about, mobile device management because there are still some use cases. You know my opinion about bring your own devices. They should be managed modern, but there are use cases for modern management, for mobile device management. If, for instance, we want to have more control, to lock down a device which is maybe a kiosk device in a shop, uh, using for only one purpose, and that's starting an order app at a restaurant, for instance. If we want to deploy apps, if we want to deploy VPN, email, Wi-Fi profiles, or if we want to deploy certificates. And maybe there are much more use cases to be using MDM. So to be honest, we won't get rid of MDM pretty soon. If we can manage a large population in your environment in a modern way, we don't really need to care about those thousands of devices. We only need to care about the devices which we really care about, and those often hold more secure information. If we want to manage iOS or iPadOS devices, we can do that in different ways. And we discussed the bring your own scenario in my earlier session, and that's basically app protection. And in favor is the app protection without enrollment. A second, a little bit more restrictive way of managing mobile device, of bring your own devices, is by using the user enrollment. And this user enrollment is there already quite some time now, and it enables you as an administrator to create a business partition on a user's device and only manage that part of the device and secure only that part of the device. If you're familiar with Android devices already had Android for Work already for a long time, and nowadays it's called Android Enterprise Work Profile. It's there already for a long time. And iOS, Apple decided to create a similar scenario for bring your own devices. Device enrollment is there already for a really long time. And basically, what we do is we almost gain full control of the device. So, for instance, we're able to completely wipe the device if necessary. With user enrollment, we are not able to do so. If we really want to control the complete device, we can use automated device enrollment. And basically, we already have that also for a long time, and that's used to be called Device Enrollment Program, DEP devices. So those devices are added to a portal, and nowadays the Apple Business Manager, and they will sync down to your Intune environment, and you can assign them a profile which needs to be deployed when the user will activate the device for the first time. And from there, it's supervised and fully controlled. So Apple is slightly moving over a lot of controls from the device enrollment scenario to the automated device enrollment scenario. So where we were able to almost fully control a device via device enrollment, Apple is removing a lot of functionality from there. So be aware of that if you are choosing which scenario you want to support. But first, let's talk about how we are able to connect to our Apple iOS devices if we use Microsoft Intune or any other MDM. Uh, Connecting to your Apple devices is always done via the Apple push notification service. And this is a service, a cloud service maintained by Apple. And basically what we need to do is to configure a certificate, set up a connection by requesting an Apple push notification certificate that we need to import to Microsoft Intune. And if that's done, a connection is being set up and we are able to send notifications via the Apple push notification service to devices that are managed via Intune. We are not able to directly communicate with from Intune to our mobile devices. This is always done via the Apple push notification service. The devices, however, are able to report back via the app of the company portal to Microsoft Intune. So the information which needs to go back to Microsoft Intune can be shared directly. This certificate you need to request and to set up the connection needs to be renewed every year. So be aware to don't use your personal email address or your personal Apple ID, or don't let an external consultant use their personal Apple ID or their business Apple ID, because if somebody leaves the company or the external consultant is going away and moving also jobs, you don't have access to that Apple ID anymore, and therefore you're not able to renew the certificate every year. And if you're not able to renew the certificate, it will expire and all your devices will become unmanaged. And therefore you need to re-enroll all of your Apple devices. So be aware that you don't use a personal Apple ID, and configure a non-personal Apple ID with an email address that goes to a distribution list, because you will be notified that the certificate will be expired. You will be notified via email. You will be notified from the Intune portal. And to make sure that you won't expire the certificate, because if you see something like this in your tenant, you have a big problem. If 182 days your push certificate is expired, then you have a big problem. You need to re-enroll all the devices again. So if you have the basics already, and I'm sure you already have looked at device enrollment, we might want to look at the user enrollment scenario. What is so cool about the user enrollment scenario? And it's basically the fact that the user enrolls the device into Intune, and a separate volume, a separate partition is created, which is managed by the company by Intune, but everything outside of the partition in the personal space cannot be touched. For instance, one of the good reasons, one of the reasons why a lot of employees were hesitant to enroll their device via device management is that a company could wipe their device and could therefore remove all the personal stuff. With user enrollment, an admin is not allowed and it's not able to erase the device and not remove personal apps or have inventory about the personal apps. So it only is able to manage the corporate space on the device until a certain point, of course. I won't sort of highlight all the bullet points, but I think you get the point. So how does this look like in a picture? In this device, we have a personal volume in blue and in white a corporate volume. A user enrolls a device, the corporate volume is created, and the user already has Outlook in the personal volume installed. So Intune of Microsoft worked together with Apple to make sure that you don't need to install Outlook twice to also access the corporate space of the corporate data. So they make sure that the app protection policies fully integrate with the new user enrollment scenario. With that said, in the app on the personal space, there's corporate data. In the corporate volume, there's corporate data, and they can all be protected by app protection policies. So what happens if the device or the corporate volume will be deleted? Then the white space will be deleted, but also the corporate data in the personal apps. And instead of, if you would use device enrollment, then Intune would take ownership of the Outlook app during activation or during enrollment. And when unenrolling the device, then Outlook would be removed. In this case, Intune doesn't have ownership of the personal Outlook app. It only has ownership of the corporate data, so it will only remove the corporate data and not the complete app, which is, to me, a way better scenario and a way more user-friendly scenario. So how does this look like? I recorded a video for this. So the user starts the company portal, and of course I already signed in, but I'm prompted if I go to devices to begin enrollment. Here I'm able to choose, okay, who owns the device. If I select the first option, then it will be enrolled in device enrollment. Let's quickly pause here. So if I click that the company owns the device, then it will automatically enroll into device enrollment. Since I select that I own this device, it might be enrolled in user enrollment. The second option, if the user wants to entirely secure the device, then it will be enrolled in device enrollment again. But if I only select to secure the related apps and data, then user enrollment will be applicable. So next I need to walk through the steps and I see what is managed, what can be done, and so on. And I need to download the management profile. To activate this profile, I need to go to the settings app. And in the settings app, I need to enroll my device into Intune. And for this, I need to authenticate with a corporate Apple ID. And this Apple ID can be federated with Azure AD, but you also can create those managed Apple IDs in the Apple Business Manager. I will show you later on in this session how to federate your Azure AD with the Apple Business Manager. But in this scenario, you have a private Apple ID for your private apps and your private volume, and you have a managed Apple ID, in this case, Mike at windowsinsider.nl, which is taking care of the app deployment or access for your corporate volume. So if we proceed and sign in, the device will be enrolled using the managed Apple ID. And enrollment is successful. So if we move back to the company portal, the device is checked and we are ready to go. So notifications can be enabled and we're ready to go. So how do we federate your Apple Business Manager or Azure AD with the Apple Business Manager so that you don't need to add for every user a managed Apple ID? We can do this in the Apple Business Manager by going to Settings and then going to Accounts, and here we can set up federation. So first we need to connect to Azure AD. We need to sign in. And I blurred a couple of accounts because it was my business environment. We need to consent and accept that the Apple Business Manager can retrieve information. We need to add the domain which we want to federate. And from there we need to prove that the domain we are adding is our own. And a way to approve this is by signing in with the user with the UPN, in this case daalmansconsulting.com. And after this is done, the federation, basically the connection, is being configured. What happens next is that the Apple database of Apple IDs will be checked if users already had an Apple ID with the company email address. So in my case, no conflicts were found, but if there was a conflict, so already somebody was using Peter at Daalmansconsulting.com, then that email would be flagged as a conflict. The user would be receiving an email with the message that they need to rename their personal Apple ID. Otherwise, this will be done automatically, and the user will receive a new Apple ID for that. So what's new for iOS lately? There's more support for certificates. We can disable MAC address randomizations for Wi-Fi networks. We have some new VPN profiles per app account, per account VPN connection profiles. Block app clips, support for 200,000 iOS devices per enrollment token, and this is when using the Apple Business Manager. It was like 60,000 devices, and there's an improved notification experience in the company portal. So my last subject of today is how can we provide access to on-premises resources from iOS, because when you manage a device, you may want to also access internal resources, because that could be one of the use cases why we would use MDM. So we have basically two options, and one option is by using the Microsoft Tunnel solution, which is still in preview. And it's basically a VPN solution from the Endpoint Manager team, this case only for iOS and Android. But what we can do when we set this up, user logs in to an app or browser. The MDM managed device has been provisioned with a VPN profile, will connect to the Microsoft Tunnel, which is basically a Docker image on a Linux device, which allows access to an internal server. Of course, Azure AD is able to control access via conditional access, and the Microsoft Endpoint Manager is configuring the service, of course, but also the VPN profile. A second option, which is there already for a long time, is by using the Azure App Proxy. And with the user of the Azure AD App Proxy, we install an agent which we connect to Azure, and over that agent we can publish internal resources. So in short, how does this work? We have our mobile device or our Windows device. We log into a browser and connect to a public URL pointing to the Azure App Proxy. And the user will be redirected via that app proxy to the service which is published via the app proxy agent. This solution can be configured also with conditional access. It has DDoS protection out of the box. We can use pre-authentication, or you can just publish an internal web server and have the benefits of the DDoS prevention, for instance. A small comparison sheet, because there are two solutions. When do I need to choose which one? So on the one side we have the Azure App Proxy. It can be used with MDM. It can also be used without MDM. So in this case, conditional access can decide for you to use a managed app, which I discussed in my earlier session, or just use any app on a compliant device. We can only publish HTTP or HTTPS. It is applicable, supported for all platforms. And in this case, no ports to internal services need to be opened for the internet. On the other hand, we have Microsoft Tunnel, where we require MDM because we want to publish a VPN profile. Basically, all tunneled protocols are supported. It's only available for iOS and Android for now, and at least 443 or any other configured port needs to be opened so that the tunnel instance can be accessed. So let's quickly have a look at what tunnel is. So let's first look at the client side of the things. Here I have my tunnel agent, which is connected now for a couple of seconds with my tunnel instance in my data center. If I start the Edge browser, and then let's first choose the other one, we can connect via 10.0.0.9 to an internal website which is running in my data center. So in this case, you see that I'm just using an internal IP address, and I'm able to access the website via the VPN tunnel. If I use a public URL, internal.daalmanslab.com, this is a website published currently via conditional access and via the Azure App Proxy. And because my device is managed, I am allowed access. So two easy ways for users to publish internal resources. So here we are in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. Under Tenant Administration, you find the Microsoft Tunnel Gateway, which is still in preview. In this case, you see one tunnel which is active. And basically what you need to do is configure a server configuration, a site, and then install the server which is running on premises in your data center. And this is a Linux VM. And this is all pretty well documented on via the blog of Marius Sandu, which is listed in the earlier slide. And if you want to start using this is pretty easy. So what you configure in the sites, this is basically the external URL and the server configuration. And in the server configuration, you configure things like the DNS servers, which are internal, your IP address range you want to use, how to configure split tunneling, your DNS suffix, and so on and so forth. Like I said, read the blog of Marius, and this is really straightforward if you want to use this or test this in your environment. For the Azure App Proxy, we need to go to Azure AD, and let's quickly do that also. And the Azure App Proxy, which is basically the agent running on a device on a VM in my data center. And this one is also listed here, and you can create more, or you can add more and put them in different groups. But if we look at the app which is published, and this is the internal one, you will basically see the app proxy, basically see the internal URL of the website and the external URL. Since I used my own certificate, I'm able to use this URL. You can also just use one of the MS App Proxy Net URLs. So of course, if you like this, if you work with Intune or Config Manager or Azure AD, go to User Voice and see what's coming, because this is a good source to see where the product develops. But if you have a request or an ID, submit it also over there. And of course, join the community. Be active on Reddit, be active on the Facebook or YouTube, and join the local communities, the Workplace NIA community or MMS, and share your knowledge, because by sharing your knowledge, you will gain knowledge also. Because if you have a conversation with somebody about your subject matter expert in, you will learn also from others. With that, thank you very much for joining me. Hope to see you in person really soon, and have a nice day with MVP Days online.